We are back and better than ever. This is another edition of the Let's Debate podcast powered by Delahanty Media. My name is Nick Delahanty. Let me throw my co-host right into the mix here, Kyle Delahanty. Kyle, there's a lot of sports going on.
There is. Before I get into that, obviously, look, if you're watching the show, I know you guys can see it on the screen, but as for the people who are going to be listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you head over to our website, delahantymedia.com. You can catch all our previous episodes. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Let's Debate Podcast, Twitter, at Let's Debate Pod, and Instagram, at Delahanty Media. But like Nick said, we do have a lot of sports to talk about. It's a pretty unique time, or / odd time in the world right now, because if you're a sports fan, you have an opportunity to watch the NFL, college football, the MLB, the NHL, the NBA. So something we really are not used to, but I'm not complaining at all. I love watching sports, and it's great for our show because it gives us more material to cover. But like Nick said, we do have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to hand it back over to him and get the show rolling.
We really do have a lot to talk about, but there is one important piece of information we need to let everybody know about, and that is the fact that our podcast is now available on the brand new edition of Amazon Music. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can access our show on there, so it's just another way you can listen to our show. We're very excited about it. They're launching a bunch of podcasts on there. Luckily, both this show and the Pinstripe Talk podcast were two of the shows they included on their original launch, so that is something we are definitely proud to be a part of and definitely are amped up about. Let's just jump right into the NFL. We're 2 weeks into the season, and it has been nothing but a walking injury. You see some of the top guys in the game go down. Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas from the 49ers, Saquon Barkley, torn ACL, he's done for the year. You have guys like Christian McCaffrey, Drew Lock, players who were expected to make big, and I mean big, impacts to their team going down so early in the season. It's frustrating for these NFL clubs, but do you blame the NFL for kind of rushing through training camp with no preseason games? Do you think that the lack of training has really hurt these guys?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if I blame the NFL for it because they're in a tricky spot, like all the sports have been. There's not much you could really do, but there's no doubt in my mind that these injuries are happening because of, I guess, a rush training camp, no preseason. These guys might be in shape, but they're not necessarily in game shape. I mean, that's what the preseason's all about. So it is affecting them. I mean, listen, week 2, which just wrapped up on Monday night, I've never seen so many big injuries in a week in my life. When I was sitting there, I was getting notifications on my phone. It was left and right. This player out, that player out. Some of them are out a few weeks. Some of them are out for the season. It's obviously going to impact a lot of these teams because, like we both just mentioned, these are big-time players. I mean, this could cost you games. It could cost you an entire season. And also cost fantasy owners. I mean, you talk about guys like Saquon Barkley and McCaffrey. They were arguably the 2 first picks in almost every fantasy draft for this season. So it's affecting everyone. It's gotten to the point where they're actually looking at the MetLife turf because so many 49ers were injured. So, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's nothing you could do about it, right? These teams are just going to have to pick people up in free agency, bring up players from the practice squads, make trades, whatever they have to do to fill those voids now.
And the good teams are going to be able to fill those voids and try to make it work. But let's look at a team in specific. You mentioned them earlier, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. You not only lose arguably your 2 best pass rushers, but you're already banged up. George Kittle did not play in that game. Richard Sherman did not play in that game. Jimmy Garoppolo, their franchise quarterback, he goes down. Do you think that the 49ers have enough to sustain all these injuries?
For the rest of the season, I do not. I'll be honest with you, though. I think – one second. I have something playing in the background here. I don't think for the rest of the season. I think they were impacted too much. I mean, you have a guy like Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas out for the year. Tevin Coleman went on the IR today. Raheem Mostert got hurt. But I think the biggest impact, and I know Bosa might be their best player overall, but when your quarterback goes down like that, that's tough. I don't think Nick Mullins can really carry the load. So they're going to be affected. And that's devastating for them and their fans because they were looked at as a team to possibly go back to the Super Bowl and contend for another division championship. And it's a tough division. That's not going to help them out either. What do you think?
Yeah, it's frustrating because they have so much talent on that defensive side of the ball. To see those guys especially go down, and you mentioned Mostert, you mentioned Garoppolo. It's just frustrating because they're a team that has a lot of potential. But I look at it in another perspective, too. They're the only division in football with three teams with 2 wins right now. You have the Rams at 2-0, the Cardinals at 2-0, and the Seattle Seahawks at 2-0. And now, mind you, we can't predict injuries. We don't know what to expect moving down the stretch here over the next 14 weeks. Somebody's star player may go down next week. Hopefully not. Or this upcoming week. But you have to look at this if you're the Seattle Seahawks, and you have to say the trade for Jamal Adams makes a lot more sense now, given the fact that everything that's lining up, the injuries, maybe you could say even the division's weakened a little bit, even though Arizona and LA are playing well. San Fran was clearly the top team, and I think that we both agreed that they would be somewhere at the top of the division this year. So for them, look at what they gave up for Adams, but, they were trying to win with Russell Wilson in what we consider his prime of his career, and maybe that move ends up paying off for them down the stretch now that all these injuries around them are really impacting the teams that they have to compete with the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think Seattle getting Jamal Adams was going to help them out even more anyway. I mean, look, they went to the divisional round last year. They were a yard away from possibly winning the division and getting a bye week in the playoffs last year. So, listen, Seattle's a very talented team. The team that I look at now or maybe the two teams that I look at where this, injury-prone San Francisco team leads Arizona and LA, because Arizona's a team that's 2-0, and we know they're pretty much, they have like a new cast of guys, right? Kingsbury is in his second year with Murray, but they have a very talented team. They were a team that I think the both of us mentioned that we think they could kind of make that jump this year. Maybe not to the playoffs at the time, but who knows now? I mean, there's an extra playoff spot. They started the season off 2-0. They have an opportunity to go to 3-0 this week. I believe they're versus Detroit, which they should take care of easily. The other team's LA. I mean, LA is kind of on the brink there too. Very talented team. Arizona and LA to me were at the bottom of that division, and nothing against them. They're talented teams, but San Fran and Seattle were at the top. Now that opens the door. Like I mentioned, there's an additional playoff spot available. So you could have LA or Arizona go 8-8 and make the playoffs because San Fran's down. That could be 2 easy wins for them later on down the road.
Oh, especially that is in the division race, and also for teams that are playing them in non-division conferences as well. If you're playing them and they're not fully healthy, you might be able to sneak a win here or there. Now, let me ask you a question about LA and Arizona. Of those two teams that are 2-0 right now, which one do you think has the best chance to be a real contender come the end of the season? Now, mind you, obviously injuries can happen, but as of right now, which one do you have more faith in?
That's tough. I mean, listen, we've seen LA do it before, right? It's not the same exact team they had in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but you have Goff, you have Kupp, you have Woods. Defensively, listen, Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are two of the best of their positions in the NFL. But Arizona, on the other hand, they have something brewing over there. That's tough. I really do look at them as equals. But I think to make that leap, I might go Arizona, just because I don't know. It's defense have had a tough time stopping Murray thus far, and I think Kingsbury's doing a great job. They have a really nice offense and improved defense. What do you think?
I tossed and turned with this one as well, and you say, just like you said, it's hard to take that because they're both pretty equal in terms of how you can look at them. McVay's a great coach. I like Kingsbury. I think he's doing a nice job over there. It all depends on the quarterback play. And if you trust Jared Goff, it makes the situation a lot easier. And I just simply don't trust Goff as much as I would a Kyler Murray. Murray could do so much more with his legs. And I think that the Arizona offense can do a little bit more, especially if the pass game isn't really necessarily there. So I would say Arizona slightly, but not too much higher than the Rams. I think the Rams have that ability, like you said, going down the road. They've done it. They've been there. And they have the coach to do it. So it wouldn't surprise me either one. But right now, something's brewing in Arizona. So I would give them the little bit of the upper edge here.
I'm in agreement there. I mean, I spoke pretty highly of Arizona before the season started, and I really think they have an opportunity to go to 3-0 this year. listen, I've seen a lot of 3-0 teams, but when you look at the numbers, the percentage of them getting to the playoffs, when you start the season off 3-0, you put yourself in a nice position. And listen, if we're on the topic of Arizona and LA, it's important to mention, I think Seattle's the favorite at this point. So they're going to need every win to keep up with them. But as I also mentioned, that additional playoff spot is huge. I mean, we see teams year in and year out who are right there. They're on the cusp of getting in and they can't get in, either because they lost the game to get in or they fall apart at the end of the season, or just you have an unfortunate, situation where another team just ups you. But the fact that there's an extra spot, I mean, they're going to be on I think both teams are going to be there at the end of the season.
And if you're Seattle, you're looking at that schedule and you're saying, I got to play them both twice. They're both gritty. They both are tough. That's not easy wins. And they came off that win against New England where it was far from easy for them. Now, let me ask, 2 weeks into the season, what team or teams, it could be multiple, have been the biggest surprise to you so far?
In a good way or a bad way?
In a good way first. We'll save the negative for next.
All right. All right. So a team that got a big win on Monday night. I'm a little surprised by the Raiders. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big believer in the team still. I mean, I've never been a believer in Carr. I'm really not a fan of him. I think he's solid, but I think he's had a ton of opportunities there. But I was not expecting them to get a big win, and now they sit at 2-0, right? And they versus New England this week. If you could beat New England, I'm becoming more and more of a believer, because that's 2 big wins, right? And I think New England's impressed me a lot too. I mean, I know it's Bill Belichick and all that, but there's a lot of talk. Oh, how's Cam Newton gonna gel with that team and that organization? I think he's doing a fine job. I mean, they were a few yards away from winning that game the other night. Another team we just mentioned, Arizona, 2-0. I mean, they were surprised. I didn't necessarily know if they were going to start 2-0 or not. And then probably last, I'm trying to think of a team that has disappointed me thus far.
Hey, you can say the Jets. It's okay. We all know.
Well, that's not a surprise. That was expected. I'll get back to a team that surprised me in a bad way. But what's your take on that?
So I have to admit, I like what New England's doing. They were a yard away from being 2-0. I think that if you're looking at a surprise team, especially given you didn't know what to get out of Cam Newton, they would be one. I look at Pittsburgh. They had 2 nice wins. Big Ben, I doubted what they were going to do. Him coming back off that elbow surgery, 38 years old, not that same young guy that we know from the past, but they've been good. And like you said, the Raiders, you got to be impressed with their 2-0 start, beating New Orleans. Who would have thought they would have pulled that one off? But again, I don't buy into Carr like you don't. But if they beat New England this week, you kind of have to think, this team may be for real. And then the final team, I know they beat the Giants, but the Chicago Bears. Trubisky, he's in a big year of his career. He's got to prove something. And they're 2-0. That's a nice start. I still don't think they're going to win the division. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they have the defense and the personnel to be at least in the consideration for it.
Yeah. There's actually a team that I just thought about. Is the Minnesota Vikings, right? They started the season off 0-2. They're a much better team than 0-2. I don't know what's going on with them. Rodgers torched them week 1, and then just this past week, they got embarrassed by Indianapolis. It wasn't even a game. I don't know what's going on there. I thought Minnesota was a better team last year. I think losing Diggs definitely hurts them. I believe they traded Everson Griffin. That's a big loss to their defense. So there have been changes, but to be 0-2 and to lose the way they have surprised me. And also the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, I just feel like they have too talented of a roster to be 0-2. And listen, you lost to LA. That's a good team week 2, but the week 1 loss to Washington's unacceptable in my opinion. Like, you're a better team than Washington. I know it's early on in the season. It's hard to say that, but looking at the rosters and looking at, you have Carson Wentz versus Dwayne Haskins. In my opinion, the Philadelphia Eagles are the better team. So those are 2 teams that come to mind as well.
My disappointment is the 0-2 Atlanta Falcons. Now, mind you, I picked them to lose against Seattle. I did. I picked them to lose. Took a lot of grief for that from my sister, who's a Falcons fan, and Matt Ryan diehard. I took a lot of grief for that. I thought Matt Ryan never in his career started off a season 0-2. The guy's been in the league, 13 years? Hasn't started off 0-2. What happens this year? They get a big lead. My sister starts talking smack. Then she's going to text all her Cowboy friends and tell them, oh, look at me, I won. And they choked. And if anybody's seat in the hot seat is as hot as Adam Gase's, it's got to be Dan Quinn. That's unexcusable how they lost that game. That onside kick is still rolling as they watch it go by. It's just a pathetic type of situation. You can't have that good of an offense and lose a game like that. If you're in a slugfest, yeah, if your defense isn't good, I get that. It is what it is. But when you're putting up 39 points and you lose, that's pretty ugly.
Yeah, that was a blowout the entire way. I still don't know how Dallas won that game. I saw the score on TV. I went somewhere. By the time I got to the other place, Dallas hit the game-winning field goal, and I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. And yeah, you mentioned Dan Quinn. He's on the hot seat. His seat is actually burning right now. It's bad. I mean, every time I think of the Falcons now, I feel like they're blowing a lead. It's becoming a trend for them. I don't think Dan Quinn's going to be there much longer. He might finish out the season or so, but it's not even just the Super Bowl loss. It's not a loss that happened on Sunday. They consistently just, in my opinion, just haven't been playing well. And he's had a talented roster. Like, there's just not an excuse to go 7-9 with that roster, or even worse than that. But yeah, Atlanta. That's another tough division, though. On the top of that division, you have New Orleans and Tampa, who were, at least I think, is going to have a nice season. So these two losses for Atlanta, it's not a good start. It does not put them in a good position.
Yeah, you still have 6 games against the division, and say what you want about Carolina, but the other two teams are not going to be pushovers. Like, this is a bad spot for them to be in. I think Dan Quinn gets fired before Adam Gase. I'll put it on the record. I think it happens because, number one, I think the Jets are delusional. We'll get into that in a moment. But no, I just think that simply the Falcons are going to see, somebody's got to be blamed for this. Matt Ryan's putting up numbers. Like, the guy, if they were 2-0, you'd be talking about him being in the MVP conversation. He's spreading the ball around like he's giving away charity. Like, everybody's getting involved. I think I even caught a pass over the last 2 weeks. That's how crazy it is. So I just think that Quinn is on the hot seat. His seat is burning right now, like you said. I don't know. I don't think he lasts even halfway through the year at this rate, the way they're playing.
Yeah, and the fact that Matt Ryan, it's not even just this year, but he consistently puts up nice stats year in and year out. That looks even worse for Dan Quinn because he's supposed to be a defensive guru. Like, he came over from Seattle. He's a defensive-minded head coach, and your offense puts up numbers. So, therefore, the problem is your defense. Like, when you put up the numbers that the team does and the numbers that Matt Ryan does, and they have the weapons that they do, you should at least put somewhat of a decent defense on that side of the ball to win games or at least compete in more games. So that's one thing. You also mentioned that you think Dan Quinn gets fired before Adam Gase. That's a bold take, but at the same time, you can see it because, like you said, the Jets are delusional, right? The Falcons are just a better organization. So they'll get rid of their coach when they realize that time is necessary.
Or should have been gone the day they hired him, but it is what it is. Before we get into the Jets, though, let's talk about the 0-2 Giants. Saquon Barkley out for the year. Sterling Shepard, I don't even know why. Maybe you can tell me why, but he was placed on the IR. I got the notification after school, and I was like, what the heck happened to him? Is it time to put the coffin in the Giants? I know neither one of us really had much expectations for him, but is this the coffin? Is this the final dagger?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you just said, neither of us had expectations for them. I don't think many Giants fans did. It's not like you were putting a great team out there. But look, Saquon getting hurt. Now listen, Saquon hasn't played great the past 2 years. I'm not putting it on Saquon. I think he's a great talent. That's the offensive line. That's the play calling. There's a bunch of different things there. He's also been injured. He was injured last year. He's injured this year. So there's problems there. But you're taking him off the field now. Now the focus is entirely on Daniel Jones, who, listen, I mentioned last week, I like Daniel Jones, but he is a turnover machine. He does it a lot, and it's kind of at a point where he needs to fix those mistakes. And this is his second year now. You're not going to have the help of Barkley. The focus is going to be on you, so the pressure is going to be on them. Their defense is atrocious. But look, the Barkley loss is huge. And that's not just big for this year. Like, obviously, it kind of puts an end to their season, in my opinion. But ACL injuries are no joke. And the type of runner that he is, who knows if that affects him down the line. Not career-ending, but, he might not be as good as he usually is. That's a bold take, too, but it's just the reality of it.
I blame the Giants a lot for that because they never built a line around Saquon to give him a chance. And like you said, there's a lot of things that go around it. And, Daniel Jones has a lot better options than Sam Darnold. But I feel like now this is just going to hurt his progress as well. Losing a Shepard for who knows how many games, losing Barkley. Yeah, they signed Devontae Freeman, but you're losing a top 5 back in the NFL. Like, that's not easy to replace. And when you don't have an offensive line to do it, that's a little bit of a tricky situation. And like you said, their defense is just atrocious. I just think if the Giants were a 4-win team before this, I think they're a 2-win team now. I think Barkley's that big of a difference in how they're going to go about their season. And maybe they stumble upon a win here or there, but I just think that the Giants season is doomed without Saquon Barkley. Now, let's go to the other team that sadly takes the field at MetLife Stadium. The New York pathetic Jets. Do you have our garbage bags to cover our face for this, or do we not need them today?
I usually take a new one each week, so I got to make mine for this coming week. But before we jump into the Jets, I just wanted to mention 2 things. You mentioned Sterling Shepard. I think that whole issue is getting old too. He's hurt left and right. I don't even think he's that good. I really don't. People can say he's reliable. You're not reliable if you're not in the field. So that I don't know why people keep saying he's a reliable receiver. But I believe that injury was turf toe. I'm almost positive it was something involved with turf toe, but I'm not, entirely sure. But and then the other thing is Devontae Freeman. Listen, I'm not saying Devontae Freeman's not going to play well, but Barkley had a tough time running behind that line. Do we really think Devontae Freeman is going to make a huge impact? I mean, the name is big, right? It sounds nice. Oh, Giants got Devontae Freeman. Listen, there's a reason why his career is where it is right now. And he was on better offenses in Atlanta. So, anyway, we're going on to the Jets here. It's not going to get much better here. We're going to the Jets. But.
It really doesn't. The Jets get blown out on Sunday. We all knew it was coming, but we didn't expect it to happen this way, where the Jets lost to a JV team. They lost to the 49ers backup team, and they look pathetic. Say what you want about the team. I don't care. I don't want to hear anything about Mekhi Becton, how great he looks against the backups. He didn't have to block Bosa half the game. He didn't have to block Solomon Thomas half the game, and the offensive line still looked pathetic. And for Adam Gase, I play Madden. You play Madden. Our playbooks are more expanded than him. He calls the same 3 plays over and over and over again. I don't understand how many times on 3rd down you can call a screen pass and think that the defense doesn't know what's coming. And also, how do you go on 3rd down and 31 and allow 55 yards on a rush play? It's amazing. And then you have guys like Avery Williamson and McDougald going on radio shows telling them that there's no urgency in Jets camp, that they don't practice to win. What do we all see that ownership doesn't in regards to Adam Gase?
Well said. I mean, you almost took the words out of my mouth. I know last week I said there was chapter 1 of my Jets rants for the season, right? Every week there's a new chapter. This week's chapter 2. I'm not gonna go on as big of a rant as last time because you mentioned a lot of it, but it's true. I don't. There's not much to say anymore. I mean, if you want to have a few takeaways from the week 2 loss, first of all, Gase's press conference was a joke. He goes out there and says that they didn't have many plays to run on 4th down against a team like this. Well, that's your issue. You're the head coach. How do you not have enough plays on 4th down or enough plays in general for it doesn't matter what team? And what do you mean a team like this? You weren't even versing the starters. Like, it wasn't even the team that we thought we were playing against, number 1. Number 2, the first play of the game was a run play. The guy was untouched. So this whole past week was trashing Adam Gase, how bad of a coach he is. They better come out hot this week. And the first play of the game, was it 81-yard touchdown run? It was like a joke. Then there's a 3rd and 31 conversion on a run up the middle. You mentioned Madden. I can't even do that on Madden. Like, if I did that on Madden, I can't even do that on Madden, but the Jets allow that to happen. So that's the takeaways from week 2. The Adam Gase situation, I don't know what it's going to take for the Jets to, get their minds right and make the decision to move on from this guy. It doesn't matter where you look. The fans are all over, like on their podcasts, on social media. You have the players going after him. You mentioned Williamson and McDougald. It's like they're trashing him in front of your eyes. If the practice is bad, that's on the coach. it's clear as day. They're talking about the coach without mentioning him. Um, where else can I go with this? I mean, you also have the media: Mike Greenberg, Damian Woody, Stephen A. Smith, Rich Cimini, Manish Mehta. I mean, it's all over the place. It doesn't matter if it's in the newspapers, on your cell phone, on the TV. Everyone's in agreement. I've never seen. I swear to God, I've never seen um, like a unanimous agreement that someone needs to go, and the Jets continue to bring him in and leave him there. And by doing that, the coaches, not the coaches, but the players, the fans, the media are all turned against him. And your quarterback, your franchise quarterback, is regressing. And then the last thing I'll say, mentioning Sam Darnold, Darnold said after the week 2 loss that he's not allowed to audible at the line of scrimmage. How is your professional quarterback not allowed to audible at the line of scrimmage? That either means two things. Number one, Gase is too stubborn to let anyone else change his plays because he's that confident they're going to work. Number two, he doesn't have faith in Darnold. And that goes both ways. How do you not have faith in your quarterback? And if Darnold's not doing something right, then that's a problem with Darnold. So it's just a mess. It's literally a mess. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I could go on and on. I'm going to stop there.
And then Gase tried to defend the whole audible thing, saying Sam can, and he audibled on the Crowder touchdown in week 1. I don't want to hear it. Like you said, if your quarterback in year 3 is not allowed to have full reign at the line, there's something wrong there. And, I'm not one that is going to sit here and say that somebody should lose their job. Obviously, they're human beings. But, in the same token, if I walked into my job today and I did a poor performance, my job is on the hotline. He does a poor job every single week. And if you have players going out to the media saying that practice isn't what it's meant to be, don't you think these players quit on this guy? Like, take the first play of the game. Maybe these players are like, you know what, we don't like this guy. This guy is terrible. McDougal, and I think you mentioned that when we were talking the other day, he comes from Seattle, where they have a great head coach and a great organization. You mean to tell me he don't know what a good practice looks like? You mean to tell me he doesn't know how a playoff caliber team prepares week in and week out? And he sees the Jets going for their little hikes and, let's skip around the field a little bit and, watch all the guys that are hurt. The players quit on him. And they really did. And it's only going to continue.
Oh, yeah. And if you watch the game, they're getting blown out, right? They're getting blown out in the game. And it's like 3rd and long and they're just running the ball. They're not taking chances to get the first down. They're giving up. He does that week in and week out. He gives up, right? First of all, he gives up. He doesn't make adjustments. He has his game plan and he sticks to it. Like, he doesn't – you look at the Patriots, Bill Belichick goes in at halftime. He comes back with adjustments. You see what the other team is giving you and you make adjustments. He doesn't do that. It's either, okay, this is how I planned it. Let's hope it works for me. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. So I don't understand why he's still there. It's – and we mentioned McDougal. Like, it's true. He came from Seattle. He knows what it's all about. Just the fact that the ownership – I'm going to tell you why he's still there. The Johnsons don't want to admit that they made another wrong decision. And all those fans and the media out there who are saying, oh, well, it's only week 2. Listen, we're not even talking about just week 2. Week 1 and week 2 were an embarrassment. It's carried in from last year where we went 7-9 or 6-2 in the last 8 games. Look who you versed in the last 8 games. It was the bottom of the barrel. It literally, Giants, 4th pick in the draft. Redskins, 3rd pick in the draft. The Dolphins were tanking, 5th pick in the draft. Who else? The Bills didn't have any starters week 17, and the Steelers had a 3rd-string quarterback. I named 4 or 5 of the wins right there. It's a joke. So there's a lot to talk about there, but mainly the Johnsons just don't want to admit that they're wrong. And by keeping them there, they're only hurting themselves because your players are giving up on you. And your organization is becoming such an embarrassment that big-time free agents aren't going to want to go there unless you throw money at them. Like, Bell was like the big free agent you got, and you ruined his career. Why would anyone else want to go there? So they're putting themselves in a major hole.
And you said it perfectly. These guys talk to each other, too. They're friends. There's a lot of people in the league that are buddies. You mean to tell me that when they cut Le'Veon Bell at the end of the year and he's not happy with how it goes, he's not going to tell a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, stay away from that place, it's a dumpster fire? It's a dumpster fire. From the owners to the incompetent GM that made their offense even worse to the incompetent coach they have in there, all the way down to the bottom half of the roster. It's a dumpster fire. And there's no coming back from this at this point. Until they drop a complete bomb on this organization and hit the restart button, it's not going to change. And the Johnsons are a big problem with that. Yeah, they don't want to admit they're wrong, but they would be heroes. Heroes if they got rid of Adam Gase. I think the big issue here is that he's buddies with Joe Douglas. And Joe Douglas doesn't want to look like it's a mistake. Joe Douglas doesn't want to take the blame. Joe Douglas doesn't want to be under wraps. But in reality, everybody's blaming him for this terrible-looking roster that he constructed over the offseason. And yeah, I get it. COVID really impacted everything, but it's still inexcusable to go from the 32nd ranked offense to even worse.
Well, listen, I think the problem is that, yes, Douglas and Gase are friends, right? But when your team is this bad, and you know Douglas, listen, the first year, this first offseason, you can make a few excuses for him, right? And, like, it's his first go-around at this. But as time goes on, people are going to get more and more tougher on you. If you want to keep your job, or you don't want to be attacked by the New York media and the fans, you need to let him go. Like, friendships aside, you need to let him go. Also, when you look at the remaining schedule, this isn't an overreaction from Jets fans. Everyone's talking, well, they might win 4 or 5 games. What do you mean they might win 4 or 5 games? They'll be lucky if they compete in those 4 or 5 games. Like, why do we think we see Miami and we're automatically better than them? They're better than us. They've competed in more games than we have. They're 0-2, but they've competed in more games than us. We look at Denver. First, the Jets Adam Gase should be on his knees thanking God that Drew Luck's not playing. Because that's your best shot at winning. If they lose that one, he should be fired on the field. Don't even let him get back to the locker room. And then we go on and on. Like, we have another game against Miami, and then you versus LA. All this talk, oh, well, LA's a bad team. Why is LA a bad team? They have a really, really good roster. And on top of that, I was impressed by Justin Herbert. And even if Justin Herbert doesn't play, let's say he chokes these next few weeks and Tyrod Taylor comes back healthy. Tyrod Taylor is leading the LA is better than us. So we'll touch on it more next week when we're 0-3. But we have more to talk about.
And think about this, right? Not next week's show. Actually, yeah, next week's show, we'll be doing a show right before the Jets lose another game. They have a short week next week. So we get to get tortured again within a 5-day period. Twice. How amazing is that?
No, well, this is what will happen. The Jets will beat Jeff Driscoll, the backup quarterback for the Broncos, and then everyone will say, the Jets are getting it going. This is what we need. They just needed a few weeks to get going. And then we'll lose another 4 straight. And we'll be back in the same position as last year. And maybe the Jets will get to that 6-win mark down the road because that's what the Jets do, right? They win meaningless games to pull yourself out of a good draft spot.
Now, let's just play a little game here. And I'm going to read you off the games. And I want to hear your opinion on this because I think it'll be comical. The Jets have 8 games before the bye week. How many do they win? I'll name the team. Just give me a simple yes or no. And I know you're probably going to get tired of saying no. So, Indianapolis. I think that's a loss too. Denver on a short week.
I think they're going to beat Denver just because Locke's out. And Sutton's out. They have a lot of injuries.
They couldn't beat the 49ers. I think that's the final straw for Gase. He's not going to be able to figure it out. That's 2, okay? How about Arizona?
Come on.
No, okay. L.A. At L.A.
L. Which L.A.?
Chargers.
L.
Buffalo.
That's a loss. Like it's. I'm not even joking right now. I'm being completely honest.
At Kansas City.
I'm about to turn off the webcam.
And
that's the biggest L of the year.
Then they have New England at home on Monday night.
That's gonna be bad.
And then they go to Miami.
Listen, Miami, Denver, the Chargers, Miami. 2 against Miami. The only chances they have of winning a game this year unless something goes drastically wrong. But I don't think anything could go as drastically wrong as it did for the 49ers. So what does that say?
And the 49ers still spanked them. They still were able to spank them.
The only way that Jets are winning the game this year is if the flight gets delayed and they have to miss the game and Jets get a forfeit win.
And they might even lose that. They might not be able to do that right. That's the scary thing. So the best bet is that they have 2 wins by the bye week. And Adam Gase will probably still be the head coach. So, it is what it is. But let's kind of segue into the NBA playoffs because we spent half of our show talking about the NFL. we have our two series going on, Miami, Boston. Miami was up 2-1. Now, mind you, we recorded on Wednesday this week, so we might be a little outdated. Had a couple of things for work to go on, so we moved the show up. Now, what about the NBA playoffs, the Eastern Conference, is standing out to you?
Well, we mentioned it last week. I think this is going to be a long series. It's either going 6 or 7, in my opinion. We know Miami was up 2-0, and Boston had a big win last game. They just outplayed them, in my opinion. I don't think that enough players on Miami stepped up. Bam was really the only one that stood out to me. He dropped 27 points. Tyler Hero had a good game, but you look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, he needs to step up in those situations. And listen, it's one game. He's stepped up big time this entire playoff run. So, listen, sometimes you're going to have a down game, but Boston stepped up. A guy like Marcus Smart stepped up 20 points. That's unusual for him. He's usually the guy who kind of is that all-around player. He's that motor, good defensively. He could put up some points. But Tatum and Brown carried them. I still need to see something from Kemba. I think I mentioned it before. If Kemba really gets going, I think they take it. But I believe my prediction was Boston in 7.
Yeah, I said Miami in 6. If it goes to 7, I think Boston too. After that meltdown in Game 2 where they had the argument in the locker room, you just felt like Boston had to win that game. It was one of those games that you just felt the momentum had to go in their favor, or else they were literally doomed, because obviously you're down 3-0. It is what it is. Right. But, give them credit. They stepped up in a big spot. They figured it out. Like you said, Kemba's a big issue here. Kemba's got to figure it out. Kemba's got to be the man that they paid him to be. And if they want to go 7 or 6, he's going to have to be the guy.
It's weird. I feel like Boston, their biggest issue the past few years in the playoffs has been the point guard position. Because they had Kyrie in the past, and it was like Kyrie's injured. Kyrie doesn't step up in the playoffs. Then they make the change, like Kyrie walks, and they bring in Kemba, who I love Kemba. I've been a big fan of him since the UConn days. But he really hasn't stepped up either. But he's too good of a player. I feel like at some point he's going to get it rolling, and that's why I said Boston in 7. So I'm going to stick to that. But overall, I'm not a fan of either of those teams, so I'm looking for a competitive series. I would love for it to go 6 or 7.
That's the same here. I'm looking for competitiveness. I don't really care who wins it as long as somebody's competitive in it. Now, let's jump to the Western Conference. And the Lakers are up 2-1. The Lakers lost Game 3, and I'm going to say they lost Game 3 because if I'm Anthony Davis, I'm embarrassed with myself after being out-rebounded by Danny Green and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That cannot, and I repeat, cannot happen. And LeBron had a great game. Posted a triple-double. Yeah. He looked really good. But AD, the game before, you were talking about how you were the man. The man who's 6'10", one of the biggest players on the floor, doesn't get out-rebounded by guards.
Yeah, well, Nuggets played well too, though. You got to give them their credit. Like, they outplayed the Lakers completely in that game. The Lakers made a run for it towards the end, but they ran out of gas. Nuggets pulled away and they got the win. But yeah, LeBron played great. You look at his stat line; he played great. AD coming off that buzzer beater, it might have gotten to his head a little bit. He put up the points, 27 points, I believe it was. But yeah, the rebounds, they were non-existent. And you're the big man on the team, especially versus a team like the Nuggets with Jokic at center. You got to step up. Like, that matchup right there could be the series. We know LeBron is the best player on LA, but when you look at that matchup between those two guys, they're arguably the best big men in the league. So that's a big matchup. AD needs to step up, but you got to give credit to Jamal Murray, Jokic, and Jeremy Grant stepped up. He had a nice game, like a really nice game, and that's what you need. You're versing a team like LA. We talked about it. LA is the better team. They're clearly the favorites. So you need as much help as you can get. It can't all be Murray and their big man. So for someone like Jeremy Grant to step up, that's big. If he carries that into next game, who knows? I would like to see this get, go the distance as well. But I believe I said 5 games. You said 4. We said max it would be 5. So, listen, we're right if LA takes the next 2.
I was just going to ask you that. I think it's kind of scary. You're starting to read my mind a little bit. Do you still think Lakers in 5?
I do. And the reason for that, I'm not taking anything away from Denver. I wouldn't be shocked if it went to 6, but LA has dropped a game in each series they've played so far. It's kind of just how they do things, and they're able to rebound. Like, they dropped, I believe, game 1 of both the 2 previous series. And they swept them right at. Well, not swept. They went four straight right after. So wouldn't shock me if LA pulls out the next two. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sticking. I said four max. I said four. I thought they were going to sweep max of five, so I'm going to stick with that. I think the Lakers are just too good. You can make the case that Jokic is the second best player in this series. In my opinion, I think he's the best, one of the best big men in the league. But I just think that the Lakers have too much. And if AD's playing at the AD level that he could play, he's a top five player in this league. So
Yeah.
you're looking at it. I just think that LeBron and AD are going to be too much. I think he'll rebound, maybe actually physically rebound in the next contest. Now, let's jump into Major League Baseball. And there's a lot to talk about the playoffs, and we're just going to go into a brief overview because I believe we're going to go into it next week as well when the playoffs actually get rolling. It's starting to look a little more clear as to who's going to be in the playoffs, but there's still some matchups that have to be addressed and have to be altered a little bit. Yankees right now are the 5 seed. It looks like they're going to stick at that 5 seed unless they get really hot down the stretch here. But there's a situation where they're going to play either Chicago or Minnesota. And, if I'm the Yankees, I'm hoping that it's Minnesota.
Yeah, well, Chicago has been the better team this year. So I guess in from that perspective, you definitely want it to be Minnesota. But I also think our history against Minnesota in the playoffs too. We just have a nice history against them. Like we've consistently beat them in the playoffs. I don't even know if Minnesota's won a game against us in the playoffs since like the early 2000s. So I'm not trying to jinx that. I'm knocking on wood right now. But I would like to verse Minnesota too. I mentioned previous episodes. I'm not that impressed by them. Like I know they have a nice lineup, but I'm not impressed by their pitching. And I wasn't impressed by their pitching last year either. I think our lineup, if they play the way they're supposed to, we should beat Minnesota in a series. What do you think?
I think it would be a great series, but the thing that keeps coming in my mind is they don't have anybody to match up against Garrett Cole. And if you look at Cole over his last 3 starts, he's been phenomenal. And the reason being, he has his personal catcher. If the Yankees stick with Kyle Higashioka behind the plate, I don't think he loses a game 1. I think that he'll be so fired up to pitch that game, he'll go out and you'll have the best Garrett Cole possible. That puts you up 1-0. Tanaka, playoff Tanaka's a different animal. You win that game, you're up, you go into the next round. You got to win 2 out of 3. So the Yankees are in a position where even if they do go on the road, I know they struggled on the road this year, but they've had Minnesota's number. Yeah, there's a chance they get the 4 seed and they play at home, but it's looking like they're going to have to go on the road. I think they beat Minnesota. I think Chicago will be a lot more of a challenging series for them. But like you said, if they're healthy and they're rolling, I think it's going to be tough for anybody to beat them.
Yeah, if the Yankees keep playing the way they are, I believe they're 8-2 in the last 10. They had I think they won last night. They're playing well. Like the bats are going. Cole's getting it rolling again. I think he went 7 innings last night, like 1 run or 1 hit. I wasn't watching the game, but he's been playing great. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Tanaka when it comes to the playoffs. Like to me, he was always a good playoff pitcher. I felt more confident in pitching him than we did Severino and Paxton in the years past. So to me, he's the number 2. And I felt he should have been the past few years. I don't know if it actually played out that way, but I was just confident in him. So I'm looking at 2 pitchers right there to go up against possibly Minnesota, and I feel confident in that.
I do too, and I think that the Yankees, regardless of who you play, it's going to be a tough series. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park. But if you go to Minnesota, they've been really good at home this year, so you can't discredit what the Twins have done. But also, let's look at the Mets here. Mets, they're on the outside looking in. You mentioned it before the show that there's scenarios they can get in, but it looks like it's going to be a long shot at this rate.
Yeah, there's a few different scenarios that could happen if they go 5-0 or 4-1 or 3-2. They basically need the teams above them to fall apart the rest of the way. Listen, it's possible. Like there is a chance, but like you said, it's a long shot, so I don't really see that happening. But if you take a look at the NL teams that are kind of in the race, it's close. I mean, these teams are a half game out, a game out, maybe 2 games out with 5 to go. It's going to be close towards the end. And there are some competitive teams on the outside looking in. You look at Philadelphia. I like their rotation. I like some of the bats that they have. They were in it, right? They kind of just slid out right now. So that's a team I'm looking at. But overall, you know what? There's a lot of teams that clinched. There's a few teams that clinched that I like as well. We know LA is probably the favorite to come out of the NL, but I like Chicago a lot too.
Yeah, I think the NL is more intriguing than the AL in terms of the
Yeah.
race to get in. I think once you get into the playoffs, I think the American League takes the cake. Other than possibly that Toronto matchup, whoever plays Toronto, I think everybody else is going to have a tough time. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park. That just shows how good the American League is. You really essentially don't want to match up with anybody because anybody could beat you on any given day, especially if there's no prior history this year with any of those teams unless you're playing somebody in your division. So it is interesting. The National League is set up more for upsets. You know, there's a couple of under 500 teams that might get in. There's a couple of teams at 500 that may get in, and they could probably play spoilers. You know, the Dodgers look like the clear-cut favorite, but we all know how they've been in the postseason. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, if you're the Mets, right, you got to root for the Yankees this week. They got the Marlins for 3. That's huge.
Yeah, it might be the only time the Mets are fans are rooting for the Yankees anytime soon. But you mentioned a lot of good points where any matchup you're going to run into in the playoffs is going to be tough. Like I remember there was rumors of the MLB playoff format possibly turning into, oh well, we want to verse them. Like the top seeds pick the lower seeds. I was never a fan of that. I think you're setting yourself up there. Like who are you to pick who you want to verse? Like if you lose to them, that's an embarrassment. But I also think that the way that the season has been played, right? So many games in such a short period of time, but really no rest. Records are records. It really doesn't matter what your record is. Like it matters to get into the playoffs, but who's to say a 30-30 team isn't better than a 40-20 team? It's just the way that they played in these past few games. So I wouldn't really overlook anybody. I mean, it's a shortened season. Some of these teams that are at the top of the standings, we never expected to be there. And there are some teams we expected to be in the playoffs who are kind of on the outside looking in. So, listen, the playoffs are a whole new game. You're in a series against someone. You got to outplay that team in a series. Anything could happen.
And one more quick note on that, too. This playoffs are a lot different than anything else. Like you said, I would have hated that rule because if you're the 1 seed, you pick a team to play and they smack you around, that's embarrassing. That gives them fuel for fire. Also, if you're looking at this, not only do you have to be the better team on the field, you've got to mentally be checked in because they're going in a bubble. They're being isolated. It's a different world. You know, if you're the Yankees, that home field advantage in the first round is big, but you go on the road for the rest of the way. Like, that plays a toll on people. You're not by your families. You're not going home. You're not following your regular routine. You're isolated. You're not allowed to have human contact with others. You go from the bus to the field, from the field to the bus back. There's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts around anything else. So I think it's going to be a challenge both mentally and physically for the teams involved. And the strongest teams are going to survive.
Yep. I also want to make note of, I believe the commissioner is trying to get fans at the NL and ALCS as well as the World Series. I think that would be great for the sport. I don't know if that's definitely going to go through, but I believe that's rumored to be in the talks. So that would change things up. I don't know what fans. I don't know how they would work that and how the fans would need to isolate themselves and if it'd be the same fans day in and day out. I don't know. That's something for them to figure out. But also, I was taking a look at the postseason schedule. Playoffs open up on Tuesday the 29th. I believe it's the four AL wildcard games. But then the following day, that Wednesday the 30th, you have 4 AL and 4 NL. That's great. That's a lot of baseball in one day. Like, I'm all about that. For this expansion of the playoffs, it just means more games. So I'm looking forward to watching that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the opening weekend of March Madness. You know, it's just like you turn on this game, there's another game on, or you turn on this game, and once that ends, another one opens up. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if you got a chance to look at that either.
Yeah, that would be like a national holiday for me. I'm not going to even lie. That's going to be like a national holiday. You know, I'll be watching the Yankees. I'll be going nuts over what they do. But overall, I think it's a great format. I think it's going to get a lot of people involved. Now, are you ready to jump in to our pick'em for the week? All right, before we do that, I got to give you credit. You had a hell of a week in terms of picking. You only got 2 games wrong. As you see on the screen, I just put it up. Kyle only got 2 wrong. Picked Indianapolis over Minnesota. We both got that one wrong. And then we got New Orleans wrong over the Raiders. That was a big upset. I picked Atlanta. They choked. Thanks a lot, Jess. Your team stinks. But like I say to my family, my dad's a Giant fan, my sister's a Falcon fan, me and my mom are Jets fans. We all stink, but we stink together. And if we were going by the spread, I would have won the Cincinnati game, but you know what? We weren't going by the spread. Cleveland won that one. The 1 week I don't take Baker Mayfield, and he does well. What was your take on this week's games? You were the star of the show.
Well, I must say, I might be a crazy Jets fan, but I'm not that crazy. I have an idea of what I'm talking about.
Oh, we know. We never doubted you.
I got a little lucky too.
Hey, we never doubted you. We know that even though you're a Jets fan and that's some bad decisions that we've made over our lives, that you know how to pick a football game.
Well, when you think Jets football, you think bad football. So bad minds, it comes all together. We're all in the same thing. But there's a few of us that stand
Absolutely. Some of us are still smart. Don't say we're all dumb. Okay? Let's go into these games. Tonight's game, Jacksonville's hosting Miami. That's going to be a fun one.
I'm actually going to go Jacksonville. That's a toss-up, but I don't know. I like the way Minshew's playing. I think they've been playing good against competitive teams. What do you think?
I agree with you, Jacksonville. I think it's going to be really close. I think it'll be a good game to watch. Atlanta hosting Chicago on Sunday. Who do you got?
There's a lot of good games this week. I was taking a look at them. This is a toss-up too, but I'm going to go Atlanta. The reason for that, Chicago has a great defense, but I think if Atlanta's offense gets going, I don't have that much faith in Trubisky to put up those points to match them.
That's the reason I think I'm going Atlanta too. I think the offense will come through. Please do not let me down this week, Atlanta. You let me down last week. Buffalo hosting the Rams. That might be the game of the week in terms of the Sunday early games.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of good games. Like I was thinking the same thing as I was going down. I was like, oh, good game, and it just got better and better. But I'm going to go LA in this one because I think Buffalo's the real deal. But they've had 2 easy games to start off the season, and I don't know if they know what's coming with LA.
I think LA needs this game. I think with the division being so close, the non-conference games are going to mean the world to them. They're going to be ready to play. McVay's going to have them ready to rock and roll. I say Rams in a close one in Buffalo. Cleveland hosting the Washington football team. I always get that wrong, but I got it right this time.
I'm going to go with a little upset here. I'm going to say Washington wins.
Ooh.
And the reason for that is I don't know why, but I've kind of spoke highly of Cleveland the past few weeks based on their roster on paper. But I think if Washington's pass rush could get to Baker, they're not going to put up a lot of points. So you might not need a lot of points from Dwayne Haskins.
I'm going to go Cleveland. I don't think that, like you said, Washington's pass rush has been really good. I just think Cleveland's going to start to find the groove here. I think Beckham's going to prove his worth and have a big week. Tennessee at Minnesota.
That's another good one. I'm going to go Tennessee here. I don't think Minnesota's an 0-3 team, but they're not matching up well. I think Tennessee's playing really well.
Yeah, it's hard to pick Minnesota here, especially at home. I'm going to go Tennessee. I think defense holds their offense, and Tannehill and Henry get the job done in terms of points. This is a really good game, too. Vegas and the New England Patriots. That game's in Foxborough.
Yeah, this is a toss-up. But I decided to go with New England, mainly because they held up on their end versus Seattle, and unfortunately they went against Russell Wilson, and you can't put Russell Wilson in the same conversation as Derek Carr, so I got to go New England. I'm
going to say Las Vegas here because I think that after that Saints win, I think they're trying to prove something. And if they win that one, I think that they're going to prove to everybody that they're here and they're real. So I'm going to go Vegas here, a little bit of an upset, and we'll see how that one goes. San Fran, the beat-up San Fran 49ers, they got to play at MetLife again. They got the Giants.
I think the Giants get this one. You got a beat-up San Fran team, and San Fran had to travel back home. Now they're traveling back. That's a lot of traveling. But I think San Fran's just too beaten up. I really do. I think it's gonna be bad, but I'm gonna take the Giants.
I'm gonna say it's a bad game, but I'm gonna say the 49ers. I still think they find a way to win. I don't think the Giants are that good. Cincinnati visits Philadelphia. This might be a bad one of the week too. This might be an ugly one.
Yeah, this is gonna be ugly most likely, but I'm gonna go Philly. Listen, Burrow's been actually impressing me. He's played pretty solid, but come on, Philly going 0-3. I feel like they're a better team than that.
I don't even know which way to go with this one. I'm going to go Philly simply because they're home. I think that if this was on the road, it'd be a little more trickier, but I think it's going to be an ugly game whichever way it goes. Pittsburgh hosting Houston.
That's a good one. I'm going to go Houston. I know Pittsburgh is 2-0 and they have a really good defense, but and I also don't think Houston's as good as they were last year, but 0-2, they're really not 0-2 if you think about it, right? They versed Baltimore and Kansas City. I don't know if anyone opened up a season tougher than they have. So with the fact that they went against those two superstar quarterbacks, you're going against a much slower offense with Ben Roethlisberger. I think this game's a little easier for them than the other two. So I'm going to go Houston.
I'm going to ride on the Pittsburgh train here. You know, it would be really nice if Houston had a dynamic receiver, like one of those elite receivers, you know, maybe like a DeAndre Hopkins or somebody of that nature. But, you know, unfortunately, they don't fall from trees. You don't have that. So I'm going to go Pittsburgh. I still think that they're going to ride high, especially at home. Indianapolis hosting the New York Football Jets, if you can even call them a football team at this rate.
There's not much to say here. I think the Colts take it in a fairly easy game.
Colts up by 30 at half?
that would sum it
Yeah,
up.
I'm picking India in case you didn't know. The Chargers taking on Carolina. That game's in L.A. We'll probably see Herbert again because Tyrod Taylor had that whole punctured lung issue happen with the team doctor.
Yeah, I'm confused by that too. Pretty sure he was getting a rib injection and they punctured his lung. They had to go and get Herbert to get ready to start at kickoff. But I was impressed by the way he played. I think LA is a better team than Carolina, especially with McCaffrey out, so I got to go LA.
I'm going LA too. I was impressed with Herbert, especially in the circumstance, you know, getting thrown into the fire. That's not easy to do. I'm going to give them the nod there as well. Tampa hosting the injury up Denver team. Well, actually, the game's in Denver.
Yeah, but I got to go Tampa here. With no lock, it should be a cakewalk for Tampa if they get things going early and they play well.
Denver's offense was struggling before Locke went down. What's going to happen when he's not even playing? So I'm going to go Tampa too. Arizona hosting Detroit. I know you said earlier you think this is going to be an easy one.
I take that back. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be high scoring. But I think Arizona wins.
I do too. I don't buy any stock in Detroit. I'm going to go Arizona.
Yeah.
Seattle hosting Dallas. That should be a really good game.
Yeah, when I first saw this, I was like, how is this not a Sunday night football game, one of those primetime games? I also think this one has an opportunity to be high scoring. I hit the nail on the head last week when I said Dallas, Atlanta would be high scoring with Dallas taking it. This time I think it's going to be high scoring, but I think Seattle. I said it last week. I don't really go against Russell Wilson too often. The way he's playing, I can't go against him.
Even with Seattle's defense struggling a little bit, especially in the pass game, I can't go against them here, especially at home. I know the fans aren't there, but I'm going to go Seattle. Our primetime games, you got New Orleans hosting Green Bay. That should be a really good game. I keep saying that, but there's so many of these that are going to be really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good games. I got to go Green Bay. The way Rodgers is playing, that offense is clicking. And you could just tell something's off with New Orleans. No Michael Thomas. Breeze is struggling. We know he's getting up there in age, but they're relying so much on Kamara, which, look, he's on my fantasy team, so I love it. Keep giving him the ball. Just don't get him hurt. But I got to go Green Bay. They look like the better team right now.
I've said it the last 2 weeks. I'm going to say it again. The Aaron Rodgers MVP tour proved the Packers wrong that he still has something in the tank. I'm going Green Bay. And our final game of the week, this is a big one. Baltimore hosting Kansas City. This is huge.
This is must watch. You're getting a preview of the AFC Championship game. So this is tough. You know, I at first thought Baltimore, but I changed my mind and went Kansas City. And the reason I went Baltimore is I think they've been playing better than Kansas City has. Should I change my pick on here? I don't know. I'm gonna go Baltimore. They just look like they're playing better offensively and defensively. And the Chiefs, they didn't look so great last week. They really didn't against a solid defense. So I'm gonna go Baltimore actually.
I'm glad we had the same logic there. I'm going Baltimore because Kansas City's not playing well. They didn't play well in week 2.
Yeah.
You know, say what you want about week 1. It was primetime opening night. It is what it is. But Baltimore is playing better. I just think round 1's going to go to Baltimore. It could change later on in the year. Kansas City could win that matchup later on. but I just think Baltimore's got it clicking right now, and they'll take home the win. Now, what's your final thoughts for tonight's show?
It's always enjoyable to do. There's so much sports to talk about right now that I love talking sports. So as much as we have a lot to cover, which is great. But I will say this: my prediction is that my predictions this week aren't that good. I took a lot of shaky games, or a lot of shaky picks, I should say, because there's a lot of tough games. So I think I jinxed myself before I made the picks. I was like, hey, you know what? I know what I'm talking about. Not this week. That's my prediction. I don't think it's going to be good.
I think you'll do just fine. You had a great first 2 weeks. We're both doing really well considering you look at these analysts. Some of them are under 500, and there we are, both well over 650 in terms of winning percentage. So, we're doing something right here on the show. But as always, follow us on social media. It's on the screen. If you don't know already, find us on our website, DelahantyMedia.com. Everything is located there for you. And we'll be back next Thursday. And what better way to gear up for the fantastic Thursday night football game between the Denver Broncos and the New York Jets and to listen to two disgruntled Jet fans talk about sports. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
The show is going to be fun, but the aftermath's not going to be that great. Like, this show, in my opinion, is going to be better than what we watch on the TV. But it hurts to say this, but as a Jets fan, I've been rooting against the Jets these past few years because I think it's in their best interest. So I will be rooting against them Sunday, and I'll be rooting against them next Thursday as well.
Hey, at least you're honest, and we're going to keep it real with you every single time we are on the air. But until next time, take care, everybody. Thank you all for tuning into our podcast. We appreciate all the listens we get. If you missed part of our show tonight, check it out on YouTube. Check it out on any podcasting platform. It's there available for you. And share it with your friends. We love talking sports. We want you to join in on our conversation. But until next time, the guy next to me is Kyle Delahanty. I'm Nick Delahanty, and this is another episode of the Let's Debate podcast powered by Delahanty Media. Take care, everyone.
Take care, guys. See you next week.